Time now to take a look at what's grabbing the headlines in the papers across the world. Belle Lupton has been scouring them and is with us now in studio. Good day to you, Belle.
Hi.
Turkey's change of tactic in the relation to Syria has been gaining a lot of coverage.
It has, especially in Turkey. So let's start there with Turkish paper Hürriyet. So it leads on the front page with this story. And in the English language version of that paper, it describes how it had a working dinner with Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu. And in it, he said that Turkey's raids on IS and the PKK have changed the regional game. So this shows Turkey really trying to flex its muscles. It's a sort of show of power, this whole thing, and essentially trying to show itself as a regional power. So meanwhile, Al Hayat, which is a Saudi paper based in London, focuses more on the way that Turkey's new launch of essentially bombings and airstrikes have changed Turkey's relationship with the US in the region. So it leads with a headline saying, Washington calls on Ankara to distinguish between IS and the PKK. That's there in Arabic. Now, Turkey has been targeting the PKK, which is the Kurdistan Workers' Party, in northern Iraq, as well as targeting IS in Syria, which is what it was ostensibly trying to carry out. Now, this paper here highlights how Turkey risks rubbing up its allies the wrong way by targeting the Kurds. And then if we go to the Wall Street Journal, the Wall Street Journal tells us why that might be. So that's because the Kurds have emerged as Washington's most effective battlefield partners against the Islamic State, even though the US and its allies had for decades listed the PKK as a terrorist organisation. Now, the Wall Street Journal focuses on the story of one woman, there she is, you can see her, who is a 24-year-old Kurdish woman, now a fighter, and she's fighting against IS's advances on self-governing Kurdish communities. And the Wall Street Journal here says, fighters like Ms. Rukan have presented an appealing face of the guerrillas, an image of women battling as equals with male comrades against an appallingly misogynistic enemy. So Turkey's bombardments on Kurdish positions are threatening the US's alliance with this key partner.
And yet we did hear from the White House over the weekend that they recognise Turkey's right to defend itself and they still see the PKK as a terrorist organisation. It would look like Turkey and the US are still working, if not still together, more closely together.
Absolutely. It's a really complex situation with shifting alliances all the time. But according to the Washington Post, Turkey and the US have certainly agreed on a sort of safe zone, which would be along the Turkey-Syria border. So the Washington Post said it's not the full-scale no-fly zone that Turkey would have wanted, but the area could eventually become a protective haven for some of the estimated 2 million Syrian civilians who have fled to Turkey.
OK, well, meanwhile, Barack Obama, US president, has been busy in a different region. He's continuing his African tour. Today he's in Ethiopia. I imagine that's getting quite a bit of coverage.
Well, he was greeted there with less enthusiasm than he was greeted in Kenya, which obviously was his homeland. The New York Times has an article from JC Fortin, who's based in Addis Ababa. She reminds readers of Ethiopia's dodgy human rights record and May's election, in which the ruling coalition won every single seat in parliament. So Fortin reports that opposition parties in Ethiopia don't expect Obama's visit to result in much political change in the country. They may hope that Obama will find a way to bring human rights records or bring human rights issues to the fore, but the reality is that defence and aid partnerships will probably be higher priorities.
OK, well, now let's have a look at a story that came out over the weekend on Greece. It shows just how close the Greek government came to drastic measures before Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras struck a deal with his creditors.
So this is an interview that the Daily Telegraph did yesterday with the former Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis, who you can see there. He goes over revelations that were leaked in the Greek paper Katimirini. In it, it turns out that Varoufakis was tasked by Tsipras to create what could be called a parallel banking system. That would be by raiding the central bank reserves and hacking taxpayer accounts in order to avoid what he called financial strangulation by the ECB. Now, Varoufakis says in this article that came out yesterday with the Telegraph, it's an interview, he says that the revelations are correct, but the telling of them has been twisted in a way that essentially makes it look as though Tsipras and Varoufakis were angling for a return to the drachma from the beginning, which he says is not the case.
Okay, questionable. Finally, very quickly, Belle, a victory for British cyclist Chris Froome. He's the first Briton to win the Tour de France twice, but he's not getting to celebrate completely in peace, is he?
No, not really. He's on the front page of pretty much every British newspaper, but the spectre of doping still looms large behind him. Suspicion and criticism have followed Froome all the way around the Tour de France this year. And The Guardian has an editorial which points the finger not at Froome, but at his sport. It says cycling is so mistrusted that nothing can be taken at face value. Part of the problem is that while athletes themselves fear that their rivals are doping, there will always be an incentive to do it. That's the Lance Armstrong rationale, it says. So trust, The Guardian says, is really tough to win back, but it matters. And the reason it matters is because sports holds out to the world the promise of a reward for virtue. That virtue, of course, being hard work.
Okay, well, we'll have to leave it there for now. Thanks indeed for that. That indeed brings us to the end of this edition. Do take care.